Well, hello and welcome to the third episode of Hull Seahawks Behind the Curtain in association with Beverley FM. And we've got another fantastic podcast scheduled for you today. We are joined in the studio this week, not by Matty Davis and a couple of players, but by some people who are very, very well known in the Hull ice hockey community. We've got the Carruthers family in with us today. I'm going to start off by introducing Colin. How are you? Thank you very much for joining us. Well, first of all, it's your first time obviously on the podcast, but you've been on Beverley FM Sport with myself and Martin before. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, it's a bit different. I'm in your studio. It's nice to be in this setting, so thank you very much for the invite. And it's a lot different to be in the studio rather than be on a phone. It's a bit more personal, and yeah, it's good.
Hopefully you can see we are semi-professional we do have some little bits of kit. But we're also joined by Paul. Thanks very much for joining us, Paul. First time, obviously, on the pod, but also with myself and Martin. Thanks very much for coming in today.
Yeah, no worries. Looking forward to it.
And, of course, I'm joined by my regular co-host, Martin Cattle.
How are we doing? All right, yeah, I'm very much looking forward to episode 3. We're flying high at the minute, aren't we, this podcast? It's great.
We certainly are, and I've still not quite got over the question that ended last week's episode of 100 horse-sized ducks. It's still frightened me all week. But we're going to get straight into things this week here on Behind the Curtain, and we're going to talk Hull Seahawks, we're going to talk Humberside Seahawks, because this isn't just a podcast about the now. We also want to celebrate what is Hull ice hockey, and of course this club is named after another former great club, the Humberside Seahawks of the late 80s and early 90s, and this year celebrates the 35th year of their birth, Colin.
Yeah, 35th year. Sunday the 18th of September 1988, that was the first game that brought attention to me about ice hockey. It was my 13th birthday present from Paul and Julie Carruthers, which we haven't looked back since then. We went every single game.
And of course, going there at the age of 13, I was a pretty similar age when I started getting into ice hockey back in the Stingrays days, and there just isn't a sport like it, and there's a reason why it catches you so quickly, and it's different to watching it on telly. I've got a lot of friends, and I'm sure Martin might agree with this, that he'd watched ice hockey on the TV before and things like that and heard a lot about it, but going to a game, witnessing it live, there's a bug that catches you unlike any other sport. Yeah,
without a doubt. It's the thrills and spills. You just don't know what's going to happen next. There's hit checks, the goals, everything. The crowd, the expectation, getting to meet other teams as well, and getting to have lifelong friendships along the way. That's unstoppable. 35 years of ice hockey, and I've got 35 years of worth of friends. So.
And Martin, would you agree then that's the case, that of course you started following ice hockey in Hull just this past year? You came with me for a few games, and now you've ended up sort of devoting a lot of your time to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like I feel a bit of a novice sat in this room right now. I'm pretty much the rookie here, really, but I'm really looking forward to this one, just to hear some of the stories and some of the memories that people have, because, like I say, I knew Hull hockey was big, but I never really got invited into it. And like when I went with you, Connor, and we started doing commentary, I just fell in love with the sport. I've never known anything like it. But then it's the community feel, it's the volunteers, it's everything. It's just sort of like you step into that ice arena and it's just like another world. It's incredible. It's really hard to explain, but yeah, it's been amazing. I've loved my small journey, and long may it continue.
And of course, Paul Collins just mentioned, of course, you were the one to introduce him 35 years ago to the sport. Yeah. What was it about sort of the Humberside Seahawks and wanting to take Colin there and for yourself? And,
it was just a new sport to watch. I mean, I used to watch Rovers. I never watched football. I've never been a football fan. I've never really been a football fan. I haven't supported a football team. Used to watch Rovers. Come from Cumbria, so in Cumbria I used to watch Whitehaven in Cumbria, rugby. I used to watch the Speedway as well, but with it being a brand new sport, I thought, well, let's have a crack at it. I think it was only £2.50 a ticket, £1.25 for our kids, so it's probably cheapest. Well, I don't buy birthday presents now anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but it's probably the most expensive one I've probably bought in the last few years. But yeah, we went to it, loved the atmosphere, all the things about the music in the play, when you could hear the bone crunching hits in the corner. The fact that we scored, what was it? Was it 18 goals? I think it was 13. I can't remember now. Whatever it was, right? 18 or 13 goals in the first game. and you was like, oh, this is really good. This is not like watching boring football. And like you say, on the when you're saying about watching it live and watching it on TV, you could never understand it on the TV because you're like, oh, what's happening here and what's happening there. The only thing that made me think when I first got there was like, you was used to watching it on telly, but you was used to watching teams like Durham Wasps and Fife Flyers and Murrayfield Racers and Nottingham Panthers. But we got the programme and none of them was in it. You didn't on your first time you realised that we were in the third league. So it was like looking at places like Bracknell, where's that? Basingstoke, where's that? You know what I mean? I've never at Chelmsford and all these southern places that I've never ever been to. At the end of the season, I've been to every single rink. The first season, I think me and our kid went. I mean, when we first got started, I think it was about 3 or 4 games in, and started doing away trips, and it was the same people going in, so you had a good bond with them. You made friends. I've still got friends in Bracknell, John and Yvonne from Bracknell Busby. Met them in the first season, so we've had friends from them for like 35 years. Still talk to them, still meet up randomly in London or wherever. A couple of years later, you meet people from Whitley, from Durham, from Yarra White. Still talk to all them sort of people. Something that you don't really get in any other sport, really. Like I say, you go to these new places. You think, well, you would never go to these. Like after teams now, they wouldn't think, well, I won't come to Hull. And then they come to Hull and they go, yeah, well, it's not as bad as what it seems on the thing. It's like saying, well, Bracknell, what's that? All about Slough, you know what I mean? Places like that. And you go, well, actually, when you go down there, it ain't that bad. So it's a good experience for kids. I mean, I'm looking forward to taking Logan on an away trip, really, because he's never experienced one of our legendary away trips. But if he falls asleep, he's had it. Put it that way.
But I say there is just, as Martin and yourself have both alluded to, there is just this community feel with hockey. It's what draws people in, it's what keeps them, and it's what makes us all as hockey fans want to bring more and more people sort of into. And I say that's going to be the next challenge, maybe, for the Hull Seahawks this year, about building upon those successes of year one and making this an even bigger part of the whole sporting community this year. But one thing I do just want to sort of mention is, I say you've both spoke about the whole atmosphere, the arena. There is just a special atmosphere, I don't like using this, but a vibe about being at an ice hockey game. You've mentioned the music, the announcers. There's nothing else like it. And so I used to be a fan of Speedway, thinking about the whole Vikings era, and it's similar, a bit of music, a bit of announcing here and there, but it's what's left of what I would think of like traditional old school sports in our area, Colin.
It's when you score a goal. It's that buzz. It's that feeling of euphoria. Granted, it's only a couple of minutes, but it's just the whole people just seem to just capture that emotion, and it just the whole arena erupts. I mean, especially on close games. The closer the game, the better, I think, because you just, like I say, everybody just seems to just get on board, sing, cheer as loud as they possibly can, and be the extra person on the ice.
We've had a few of those nail biters this year. Even late in the third, and particularly when it goes to overtime, and it's action at either end. I can't remember quite who it was against this season. We've got a breakaway at one end, they break the other way and take the game in overtime, and of course it's heartbreak. But throughout that whole journey of the game, the emotions are something that you just don't get, or very rarely get, in other sports. But it's a week-on-week thing in ice hockey. But something I just want to pick up on what you said, Paul. Of course, 35 years ago, the Humberside Seahawks were in the third division. They very quickly made that journey up through the league, didn't they, in the 5 years?
Yeah, well, I think the first couple of years, the council's backing them. It was Humberside Council then, and they had a bit of money to spend. Plus the fact that first season, within the first 2 or 3 months, there was regularly getting 2,000 people through the door. Well, unofficially getting 2,000 and getting people through the door. It wasn't like seats then, it was all benches. You were queuing. If you didn't get in the queue for like, I don't know, 3 o'clock for an 5:30 face off, you wouldn't get your seat. You wouldn't get anywhere near the seats that you wanted to. Plus the fact that when it all started off, both rugby teams weren't as good as what they were in the early 80s, and a few fans started drifting away. I was one of them, started drifting away from the rugby, so it started, and obviously Hull City were nowhere near where they went up to. They were only in Division 4, I think, at the time. So they tapped into a brand new market of fans that were like wanting to watch something different, for want of a better word. They went through the first season, got promoted. In one of the classic games that you'll ever see. We've got a video of it somewhere in our house against Bracknell, where the absolute. I've probably heard the rink as loud as that. Probably I can count the number of fingers on one hand as loud as that game was. That was a really loud game. The Durham game, the Stingrays game against Brayhead, there was the loudest games. That one there, you couldn't hear yourself think. And at that time, you were allowed air horns in, so you were coming away with tinnitus at the end of it. Like the year after that, they consolidated in the Division 1 as it was. Slough actually won that one, I think it was, but then I don't think they got promoted. I can't remember if they got promoted that year. And then we won it the year after to get promoted because they started spending the money. Well, we held the record. We held the British record for a transfer fee. We spent £35,000 on the Johnson brothers, 3 British players from Durham. Probably the best money that Adrian Florence ever spent, like he said, because they got us promoted straight away. The chemistry between them 3 kids was unbelievable. Went up the next year. Maybe not as good as what we could have been, really. No. I think we expected, because we was winning. I think we came 4th the year after that, didn't we? And then they started changing the imports around and stuff like that. And then, what was it, 1990, about 93-ish, 94, that's when the arena team started coming through. And they started knocking, like, when I say arena teams, I mean the Sheffield Arena they were starting selling out with 6,500 fans, and it was nowhere that teams like us could compete with it. That's what caused the downward spiral of a lot of teams after that.
There was a lot of big changes in that sort of mid to late 90 period in British ice hockey, wasn't it? As we quite regularly go through, don't we? It seems to be once a generation we get an entire shake-up.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest changes is, like, at the time, in 1991, we had a guy, a Canadian import, he's legendary in Hull, a guy called Scott Morrison. Now, in that one season, he scored 220 points. Now, that's just unbelievable. 103 goals, 117 assists in one season. Now, you wouldn't see that now.
No.
Whether or not that's a change in netminders, whether or not it's a change in players, I don't know. But he was unbelievable, the talent that kid had.
It's the whole way ice hockey's played. You look back at, and so this is a completely different level and world of ice hockey, but you look at the way points and records have changed in the NIHL from that period and now, and it's similar thing has slowly come through where teams have started playing more solid defence. It's not just a forwards game anymore, and I say netminders are constantly evolving, aren't they, in the way that they play. Even equipment sort of comes into it at times.
Equipment, the players, the actual style of how they play the game now, and the butterfly style is just completely changed.
We used to play with wooden sticks. We used to play with wooden sticks in the late 80s, early 90s, and then it was only mid-90s that they started doing carbon shifts, sticks and stuff like that. But they all used to have wooden sticks because they used to give them away like confetti, because they only used to cost like 13 to 15 quid to buy a stick then.
And you look at some of these Bauer or CCM sticks.
I don't know how teams do it, mate. How much
£200-300 a stick.
Yeah, ridiculous.
No, so we can probably sit here and talk, Seahawks and Hull ice hockey history all night long, but one thing what I do want to bring us back to is the Hull Seahawks.
Absolutely.
And of course the birth of the Hull Seahawks last year. Before we actually talk about last season, I know this is something me and yourself have spoke about, Colin, but obviously I want to speak to Paul as well about it. About when you very first heard, obviously there was a national division team coming back into Hull, and then we heard the whispers that it was going to be the Seahawks. Of course, we spoke, and we were obviously ecstatic about the decision, the fantastic times of those late 80s, early 90s, the trip to Wembley and all that, and about how it's just celebrating a fantastic time in Hull sport, and how it seems like this, the ownership group of what was Ian, Matty and Joe, and for reasons beyond, Ian isn't part of that anymore, but Matty and Joe are still wanting to continue and drive, is to bring that back, that feeling of winning championships, that buzz around the arena of having a fantastic ice hockey team on the ice. They want to bring all of that back. Yeah,
there's certainly a buzz. You can feel it around with all the fans. I mean, part of my job on a match night is selling the 50-50, so I get to meet everybody, and you can see there's a feeling of, there's a togetherness about it. We've had teams before in the past where you only have to look on the forum. They were getting on the back of the owners, or they were getting on the back of the players. But this year, even though we didn't do as well as expected, that hasn't happened, and that's so pleasing to see. I think everybody's got on board. Everybody's can see that, you know, there's something to look forward in the future. And Bayeka, we got a great team this year so far.
Is it sort of the best atmosphere you've felt around the arena for a long while, Paul?
I think, like, from a personal point of view, I'll go through it. Humberside Seahawks was my first team. So then you're asking people, am I watching a different team? It's when we went from Humberside Seahawks to Kingston Hawks, it took me 6 to 7 weeks to go. You got to do a new chant and all sorts of stuff like that. Old Thunder was the same. It's like watching a different team. Stingrays was the same. The first like sort of few years of the Stingrays wasn't very good. Towards the end, it's probably one of the best teams that I've seen towards the end. Then the Pirates, I couldn't get into the Pirates at all because I'd been used to watching Elite League level, and then you're going down to what that level was. I could understand what a Glasgow Rangers fan felt like when they got sent down to the Scottish League Division 3. Their fans, it was just like chalk and cheese. So I was like really apathetic towards the Pirates, and the ownership went fantastic. Whereas this time, you know, the owners are there for the right reasons, and they might make mistakes. They probably have made mistakes. We all know they've made mistakes. They've admitted that, but they're doing it for the right reasons. And the actual Seahawks name, when Matty told us, well, I said it was a no-brainer because nobody else is called the Seahawks. I mean, the Pirates is the first team that we've had where I'm like, well, somebody else is called the Pirates. It used to be Peterborough Pirates and it used to be Paisley Pirates. So you start thinking of that. I can't stand teams having the same name as somebody else. So this is our identity, and it's a Hull's identity. And why not go from Humberside at the start to put it to the Hull Seahawks? I don't agree with the black and white because I'm an Hull KR supporter.
That one had come out.
And I don't want. And I keep winding Matty up saying I won't buy a black shirt. I need a white one, and he's brought the white ones out, and he's wearing one here now. But they're all right for skinny people, not all right for fat people like myself. I need a T-shirt that's like a polo shirt. So when he brings one of them out, I'll buy one. But yeah, it was a no-brainer to bring the Seahawks out, to be honest.
I say, we'll actually now discuss, obviously, last season, 22-23 season, of course. It was always going to be a bit of a roller coaster of a campaign, you've got to say. The rush to get a team together, rush to try and get the imports in with the visa delays, and then we seemingly were cursed by injuries as well. And through all that, we still had some fantastic times on the ice. Myself and Martin on the commentary on Across the Pond on Beverly FM, through the Seahawks Twitter and YouTube and the fans forums, we've all spoke about the difficulties of last season a lot already. So I want to just leave those behind now, and I want to talk about the successes of last year. Of course, there were some fantastic games. We'll speak about, obviously, favourite moments on the ice. I spoke to Jordan last year about how he felt when he got the first shutout against the Bees. He said closely behind was that amazing win against Peterborough just before Christmas. And, of course, we had another one on the final day of the season in what was an absolutely incredible game. But what are your personal moments of the season? It can be games, it can be the season itself, it can be players and their stories. Colin, what made your sort of highlights of 22-23?
I would turn around and say, I'm going to completely curveball it. I'd say the merchandise. They hit the ball rolling. Honestly, they smashed it out of the park. We've had teams before in the past where you'd be waiting months and months and months for merchandise. But the merchandise this year has been absolutely outstanding, and it's lovely to see people. I'm wearing it myself. You see, it's lovely to see people walking down the street, and you can see the badge of honour. People are advertising the Seahawks, but it's a brand. I think that they've got that. For me, is a success.
Matty does laugh every single time he ever sees Martin. He's only ever in Seahawks gear.
Yeah, I went absolutely crazy when I went because, like you say, I teach PE at a special needs school, and I thought these tops are perfect for running around and things. But then the kids ask as well, and I saw like I'm going to be in conversation with Matty about him coming down to the school, one of the players, and doing some like hockey bits down at the school and things like that. You know, so but the merch, like I agree with you, Col. I think it's absolutely on point. It's phenomenal stuff. It really is. Really good job by the team there, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. On the back of that, big success for me, Obi. I have to say it. I mean, he's my protege.
Paul's sat there nodding.
I've got a man crush on the kid. He's absolutely super. I mean, look, he's not even 17. He's 17 next month. What did he score? 8 plus 3, 11 points. And he was absolutely superb. I think he's got a bright future, massively. Obviously played for Great Britain as well this year.
Yeah, it was 3 games away, wasn't it? Great Britain under 18s. He ended up taking up, was it the silver medal?
Yeah.
At the championship as well. Phenomenal effort from all involved in the squad. It's not just Obi as well. There's multiple National League players in the part of that, weren't there? You all put up great numbers, great performances, and there's so much promise of these young players in the National League.
Well, that's it. They've been given an opportunity that. I mean, I don't think OB would have been given this opportunity had it not been a first year. Not taking anything away from the kid, but he was chucked into the squad. By it, he's proved everybody, that he can play the game, and he's now a natural figure out there. And he's played second line this year. He's been on the first line when we've been really struggling. Naturally a third liner now, but yeah, long may it continue. That's a success for me, I think, for this year. Bringing on these kids, Jordan and Alex, which you're going to talk about a bit later on. Deck Jones, again. When Smithy had a chance as well in goal, I don't think he let himself down. He performed well between the net. Again, it's only going to bring him up for the future. And this is what it is. It's progression. And I think these kids have had a chance 3 years above the time. And, we're going to benefit from that now because they've got that experience behind them. They're into year 2. Yeah, let's see how they roll. No,
so I completely agree with the thing of Owen arguably getting that chance, obviously through circumstances, but he never took a step back. He progressed, through the squad for just getting minimal minutes. And he very quickly had to play an important part of the team through injury, through lack of visas, and he made sort of a spot on that side his own. You could see throughout the season how he was developing in every aspect of his game. On defence, at times, how physical he was playing against grown men, and of course that maybe wasn't quite the case in the first few weeks, but he very quickly got up to speed and started just throwing the body around, didn't he? He wasn't afraid to mix it up, and he's found his level very, very quickly.
Yeah, he didn't look out of place at all. Proud of the kid. And he's an F Block lad as well, so, we support him even more for that.
In the old birdcage.
Paul,
yourself, successes of 2022-2023?
Well, I'll leave Owen Broughton to his players agent here, Colin, next to us. He just, honestly, man, he loves you. It's embarrassing at times. I'm sat next to him. Oh, come on, OB, come on. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. He's got his man crush on anyway. I like Owen. He, like Colin says, to be fair, he's probably the biggest success of last season, player-wise. He came in. I can't say anything different what Colin said, really. What I'm impressed with the kid is he's listened to people, and you can tell he's listened to people, and he's gone to the experienced players, and he's listened to the experienced players, and that's all you can ask from a 16-year-old kid learning his trade. Listen to the experience that was in that, and he'll have listened to the likes of Nathan Salem and Sam Towner, who was captain in the team, and Declan Barmer, and he'll listen to all them experienced players, and he'll take it on board. And yeah, you'll have made mistakes, but you learn from your mistakes, and I love all that sort of stuff. Other successes, they got the goalies right. The last couple of years, the last years of the Pirates were embarrassing with the goalies. That's what was costing us games. This year, the goalies were keeping us in games, and that's all you can ask from a goalie. A goalie that keeps you in the game, it's then up to your offence and your defence to help that goalie out. Jordan was keeping us in games, but for the first 2 or 3 months when we didn't get them imports in, we had no chance. And you could see Nathan Salem, his confidence. I'm not saying it was lacking, but he was just wanting players to come around him. He couldn't do it on his own, and he was double shifting and all that. As soon as the imports started coming in, we started getting players back. The team started to play better, obviously. That Peterborough game that everybody goes on about, I always remember Famar when he got a goal. Svek just looked at him and he just smiled at him and he went, "Wow, that was good." And then I thought, yeah, we're going to crack on from it, but it never happened. It never went on, and that's a bit of a disappointment.
It was a difficult run, wasn't it? Just after Christmas, and of course there was Archer and Salem suspended for a part of that, and Matty had to hang up the skates, and it's just... And I think 8 of the 11 games after Christmas were against the top 4.
Yeah.
It was a very difficult period.
And when you're playing short-handed because your players are suspended for whatever reason, you can't even really go into that because that's another refereeing. Well, it's refereeing and the league's ridiculous scenarios of what they're going through with regarding to banning people for doing next to nothing. But other successes, like say about like Jordan McLaughlin, I thought. I spoke to friends around who I've known who's watched him, and they said him and Warburton maybe the better of the two. When I saw him, I thought no, because you could see McLaughlin was the better technical goalie, and then he kept that position. And I felt sorry for Warburton in a way because you couldn't drop him. You couldn't drop Jordan, so because he was doing such a good job.
Matty said a very similar thing last week, and it was so Curtis obviously had the injury, didn't he? Maybe a month or so.
Yeah, he got a puck to the head, didn't he? I think it was...
Yeah, it just and then Jordan made the shirt his own. And from that point on, it was very difficult to see anybody else in the net.
So there's not a lot of difference last season with the top 6 or 7 goalies in the league. There wasn't a lot of difference on any given day. I mean, I always look Gospel and Brad Day. When the last time we watched them 2 years previous when the Pirates won, they were head and shoulders above everybody else in that league. Zamora was just below them, and then he was like all runs. But you had Curling, he was a good goalie. Edley, he was a good goalie. The lad from Romford, Ethan James, fantastic goalie. Probably made them go into the playoffs, especially in the final, because he was one of them goalies that could actually win you a game on his own. Now, them goalies are good, but they're not consistently good. Whereas Jordan was consistently good enough to give you that opportunity for your forwards to crack on. Now, hopefully this season, with the additions that we've got, especially Bonner and Chamberlain, who, if you put Bonner, Chamberlain, Sam Towner, another import, Svek, and Salem in, there's going to be teams there that are not going to beat them first two lines. And then you're looking at Broughton's going to be pushing them. And as Broughton's pushing them, then players are going to have to play better because the rookie's going to take the place again. So that's only going to benefit the team.
So I 100% agree. I brought these stats up with Matty briefly last week as well. The top 6 statistical goalies in the league last year in save percentage were Gospel, Zamostra, the 2 MK goalies, Headley and Crow, and then it was the Mars, Jordan and Rennie, and of course that's your top 5 teams, isn't it? And then the next is Jordan, who's finished at the team who's got the wooden spoon.
Yeah.
And his performances have consistently not just kept us in games, they've won games, and even on games where, we haven't ended up on the winning side, he has put on incredible performances week in and week out. And Matty, he was so close, Matty said, to getting a 0.9 save percentage. And it was arguably maybe those first... that first month or so, multiple times, considering double figures in goals and things like it's always going to be such a huge mark on the statistics, isn't it? So, but Jordan is up there. You've got to say he probably is for me a top 3, top 4 goalie in this league.
There's not a lot of, like I said earlier, there's not a lot of difference between any of them goalies, to be honest, and that shows how I was sceptical about this league because, like I said, when we watched the Pirates, I was like, oh. You go into games and it was like going to be boring, that we were going to win, like that league that we was in, it was like we were winning 18 points to 0 and all that lot. But now you just anybody can turn up with a goalie there, and you just don't know who's going to win, and that can only be good for the benefit of the British game as a whole, because hopefully one of the elite clubs will take a punt on one of these goalies. Whether or not none of the big teams will, but hopefully like somebody like Dundee might take a punt on them. And then go, you know what, I'll have the British player, then I can bring in an import forward from a college kid, and he'll score more points than what the import goalie would have done towards the extra British player that I've lost out on. So hopefully it's good for them.
No, so we spoke a whole ton about goalie situations last year and about how something we will mention later on in this show actually is about the import goalie situation in the national division, of course. We now know that the Bees are the first and so far the only team to have had a punt on an import goalie. But before we come on to that, Martin, I just want to ask your successes of 22-23 And of course, your success is watching your first ice hockey season.
Yeah, I got to say, like, falling in love with a new sport, that was good. Like, stepping into that ice arena and just the warm feeling that you get from the fans, the atmosphere is incredible. Seeing a good fight, you know what I mean? Being part of a commentary team, obviously doing the radio with you, Connor, is something that we have always wanted to do. Meeting people like Colin, that, you know, do the 50-50s and stuff. People just make you feel so welcome, you know, being like a new fan. You just feel part of it. You don't feel like strayed from it or anything else. Even daft little things like when I took my boys, they're quite young, and then they had the rules written out for everyone. Any new fan coming in, the rules were written out so people could understand it, this, that, and the other. It's just an amazing vibe. There was some great goals, I thought Svek was just incredible to watch on the ice, really good. And Det Barmer, I've loved watching him play. And the fact that he spent the majority of his time playing a hell of a lot more minutes than he should have done, but was still consistent throughout and solid. For me, for my first season, yeah, it's been a huge success. Even though, like you say, you finish with a wooden spoon, but like we're probably going to touch on later, the players that I don't know much about yet, but like ex-Hull players and things like the Bobby Chamberlains and stuff, I'm so excited to see these really big characters coming back to Hull. And I think like next season, there's just going to be a lot of noise.
Obviously, I'm going to have to throw mine in there as well. And of course, whilst I want to echo everyone else's, I want to just throw out a couple of different ones. One for me is Nathan Salem. And I spoke with Matty pretty early on in the year about how he's bounced around a lot of clubs in recent years, and he seems to have found a home in Hull, and he seems to have, he wants to be here for a long time, and that's for me, it's a success story, because he's an incredible player. He was our top point scorer until pretty much the last couple of weeks of the season, where Emil went on an absolute charge. Another one for me would be, I say, the whole experience of getting involved with the club. The commentary and, of course, the media side of things, and how it went from, I say, not slow on the social media side, but everything was pretty calm very early in the season, and then through a lot of people's hard work, through whether it be Callum Gladding, whether it be Matt Mallory who does work on the programmes, whether it be Power Media who helped put the stream together, the photographers Adam and Steve, they're absolutely fantastic and do some phenomenal work and get some amazing shots that a lot of these players will treasure for years. There's just so much effort that goes into making this club look the business, and it's just continuing more and more. And of course, adding things like Behind the Curtain, this podcast just goes to add a little bit more insight for the fans about what actually goes on into making a club and a community like the Seahawks. And it's been fantastic.